Wow. Wow. It's another episode of Performance Tools LinkedIn Live with Adedoyin. Thank you so much, viewers, for being part of episode 11 of the Performance Tools LinkedIn Live. So, wherever you may be, please go to the comment section. Let's know where you're viewing us from, where you're watching from. I'm streaming live from Lagos, Nigeria. It's 3:05 p.m. here in Lagos, Nigeria. So please, wherever you may be, just let us know where you're watching from. So Whitney, thank you so much for honoring my invitation again today. Thank you so much, Whitney.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. And I want to try to see if I can pronounce your name correctly. Adedoyin?
Yes.
Adedoyin. Okay, wonderful.
No, you should have mastered this now. This is almost the second or the third time we are having this conversation.
I know. And every time I ask you to pronounce your name correctly, because I don't want to mispronounce it. So Adedoyin. I love that. It's so beautiful.
I know. That's fine. That's fine. Yeah, thank you so much for honoring my invitation today. So, viewers, I have Whitney here. Whitney is an executive coach and author of the critically acclaimed Disrupt Yourself, Putting the Power of Disruptive Innovation to Work. Whitney is recognized as one of the world's most influential management thinkers. She's a prolific speaker on driving innovation through personal disruption. She's a popular LinkedIn contributor. For some of us who are so used to using LinkedIn, Whitney's name is not. It's a common name on LinkedIn. Whitney has almost about 1.8 million followers on LinkedIn. She's also a contributor to the Harvard Business Review and also some of the major journals out there. So thank you so much, Whitney, for this conversation again. So, just for us to start, maybe you also want to just introduce yourself to our viewers. Some are watching on other platforms on Facebook. Some are watching on YouTube. And I know that quite a number of people will also join here on LinkedIn. So you may want to introduce yourself, to those who probably do not know who probably do not know Whitney Johnson.
Yeah, thank you, absolutely. Whitney. I am happy to do that. So first of all, hello everyone, Basharat and Timmy and Adebayo and Yanza and Michael. It's nice to see all of you. So my background very quickly, Adedoyin, is that I grew up in the United States. I actually was born in Spain, so born in Europe, and but grew up in the United States and had always studied music in school. And but when I graduated in music, I went to New York. My husband was studying at Columbia and discovered this thing called Wall Street. But I was not credentialed at all to work on Wall Street because I had studied music. And so I started out as a secretary and worked my way up on Wall Street, discovered, oh, this is super exciting. I want to do this. I started taking business courses at night and eventually moved into investment banking, became an equity research analyst. And as an equity research analyst, my job was to pick stocks, to put a buy and put a sell on stock, decide is this undervalued or overvalued. Discovered at the time a book called The Innovator's Dilemma by Clayton Christensen. When I discovered The Innovator's Dilemma, it talked about this idea called disruptive innovation. And that was very intriguing to me. It helped me understand what was going on in the emerging markets. I had this, I was trying to figure out why is wireless technology every quarter beating my numbers, beating my estimates? And I realized it's because it was disrupting wireline. I now have this framework to understand what was happening. This is in the early 2000s. And the more I studied this framework of disruption, I had this thought, oh, this doesn't just apply to products and services and companies and countries. It also applies to people, that we can disrupt ourselves. We can disrupt. And so that's my background at a very basic level. Studied music, worked on Wall Street, discovered the theory of disruptive innovation from Clayton, wrote a book called Disrupt Yourself, as you said, and then disrupted myself, left Wall Street, and now work with companies across the world, focusing on how do you disrupt yourself as an individual? How do you grow yourself in order for you to grow your company and for your company, your organization to be disruptive? So that's what I do. That's what I get the privilege of doing, and the people that I have the privilege of working with.
Oh, wow. That's interesting to know. I mean, your story is kind of it's interesting because you actually apply the principle to yourself. You started as an administrative assistant, grew up the rank. I mean, now that you run your home boutique consulting firm out there in New York. So, at what point did you realize that it was time for you to, disrupt yourself? At what point in your career?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And so, I've disrupted myself a number of times, but I think that, let me talk about one that I think is really applicable to all of us right now. And this is when I actually didn't disrupt myself, but I was disrupted. And I think a lot of us are disrupted right now. So let me talk through that, and we can talk about other examples. But this is when I was working on Wall Street. This is in the late 90s. And my boss had just been fired, and that happens, right? We have bosses that get fired. And I think they probably would have fired me as well, but I had really good performance reviews. And at the time, I was also pregnant. And so good performance reviews and you're pregnant, it's hard to fire someone. So they're like, well, what do we do with her? Because we got to do something. We don't really want her here. And so I kept on trying to interview for different opportunities inside of the bank. So I was working at an investment bank at the time. And there was nothing coming up. And finally, they said, why don't you go work in equity research? And so I wasn't really moved into equity research. It's more like I was shoved into equity research, like, you're going to go work here. But what's interesting about that is that when I went to go work there, once I got there, so first of all, I'm disrupted, I get there. Then once I get there, I'm supposed to cover cement and construction sector. It turns out there's just been a merger. They already have a cement and construction analyst. So now I don't even have a sector to cover. Like, what am I going to do? Well, turns out there were a number of media companies that were going public. There wasn't an analyst to cover them. And so as the theory of disruption would dictate, rather than knocking on a cement door that was closed, I built my own media door, and I became a media analyst. And within 1 year, I became an institutional investor award-winning analyst. So if you dissect this, what happened here? Number one is I got disrupted. I was moved from banking into equity research, which looked like a step down. Once I got into equity research, I didn't have a sector to cover, so sort of disrupted again. And then I said, well, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to do what a disruptor does. I didn't know to call it this then. I'm going to go play where no one else is playing. I'll do a brand new sector. And it turns out that by doing that new sector, as a disruptor would, I created a market for myself. And that pushed back, that disruption ended up being a career maker for me because I was a really good stock picker. So whenever we get disrupted, if we're willing to now disrupt ourselves, play where we haven't played, be willing to figure it out, we can actually turn that into something very, very positive. And I think that's very relevant for all of us right now who have in some form or another been disrupted.
Amazing. That's very fantastic. I mean, let me also share my own story
Yes, please
relative to
do.
some, yes, relative to what you just shared now. I remember also, I mean, that was about 2007 or thereabout. I just joined the banking industry then.
Hmm.
Up till about 2011. I remember that your article, the one you wrote, the initial article on disruption, yeah,
Oh, in Harvard Business Review, that
in
article.
Harvard Business Review. I bought that article and I read it, and I knew, I said to myself, it's time to move. I had wanted a career where I could determine my self development. I could determine the number of learning interventions. I wanted to move fast I mean, in my career, but unfortunately, it wasn't happening. And by the time I read that article, I applied it to my own career. I started looking out. But for me also, the opportunities that were coming to me, they were more of the banking industry, and I never wanted banking. I mean, I wanted consulting. I knew quite well what I wanted, and that was it. That was it. I mean, there were so many decisions I made. I mean, but that exactly how I also disrupted myself. But let's look at it this way. Um, I want us to look at industries because people work in different industries in various sectors and all of that. And I know that some industries are more disruptive
Hmm.
from another. So, how can professionals spot an industry that is so disruptive from another?
Mm, interesting question. Well, so first of all, I loved hearing your story. I think you had probably told me that, but I had forgotten that you had read that article and it called Disrupt Yourself in the Harvard Business Review back in 2012. So that's fun to hear that story and how you said, I think there's more for me. I think there's something else that I need to be doing. And I think that goes to your earlier question that you asked me, like, how do people know? You know because you can feel it. You start to feel like you've learned everything that you needed to learn in this particular role or enough. And there's something inside of you that you feel like if you don't do something new, you're going to die inside just a little bit. And so you know that you must do something because if you don't, you'll actually get pushed. I actually have a theory. It is a theory that people lose their jobs because they know it's time for them to do something new and they won't do it. And so the universe gives them a little bit of a nudge to go do something new. So to your question about how can you spot industries, I think industries where there's going to be more opportunity for disruption. Any industry that is well, if you actually apply our framework, when you've got industries that so we've got a framework of personal disruption, and there's 7 points to that framework. So the
Yes.
first point is taking the right kinds of risks. The second point is playing to your distinctive strength. The third is embracing your constraints. And there's 7 of them total, but we'll start with those 3. When you think about an industry that is playing where no one else is playing, they're creating something new. And they're more likely to be something that they're going to create something, they're more likely to build something that is going to disrupt other industries. That is going to be something that you want to take a look at. Also, industries that tend to be, so there was an article that my colleagues, Boris Groysberg at Harvard and Eric Lynn at West Point, we wrote several years ago that appeared in the MIT Sloan Management Review, is that industries that are more connected to other industries are more likely to be disrupted as well because there's
Disrupted.
greater interdependencies. So people who are willing to do new things, who are playing where no one else is playing, who are are creating new markets are going to end up being disruptors. But then also, if you're in industries that are connected to lots of other industries, it's more likely that there's going to be disruption taking place. It also means that you've got an opportunity, as well as if you can continue to stay abreast and disrupt yourself and build your skill set, you're going to also be in more demand as well.
Wow, wow, wow. I mean, that's great. That's great, Whitney. I just want us to also, I mean, with time, I'm going to put up that framework. I have the framework here so that people can also
Yep.
get to see the framework, how it works and all of that. But there's a little bit of concern. I've read it somewhere, I think even on LinkedIn and somewhere in some blogs and all of that, saying that the idea of personal disruption, as you know, it's sort of why should you apply a business principle to personal life? If I have to ask a question, why is it important right now? The
Yeah.
period we're in right now, it's a very challenging time. In terms of people managing their career, how can professionals manage their careers better in this period of uncertainty
Yeah.
that we are in right now?
Yeah. Okay. It's a great question. So first thing, so Michael, I know you asked the question. So Michael, if you just Google Harvard Business Review, disrupt yourself, Whitney Johnson, you'll be able to find the article. It was in the magazine. It was I think it was like May, June of 2012.
Yes.
Okay. So to answer your question, if I'm understanding it correctly, is people are saying there's so much going on right now. There's so much upheaval. There's so much change, so much disruption taking place. Why would I want to disrupt myself? Is that the question that people are asking, that you're posing? Okay, so I think the answer is that when we are only allowing for change to happen to us, we are being acted upon. We're allowing the locus of control to be outside of us. And so we become victims. When we do that, we become victims. This happened to me. Why did this happen to me? And we fork over, we hand over our sense of agency, a sense of who we are, our sense of autonomy, our sense of self-determination when we do that. And so the reason that we disrupt ourselves is that when you and I disrupt ourselves, we are saying, yes, there is a lot around me that I cannot control. But when I choose what I am going to do in this situation, when I choose to disrupt myself, I am taking responsibility for what I can take responsibility for. I am being agentic. I am acting. I am not being acted upon. And when you and I are willing to take responsibility for what we are doing and what is happening in ourselves, then and only then can we manage through the upheaval and the disruption that is happening around us.
Around us.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Let me put up, Whitney, please, let me put up I have I want us to look at the S-curve of learning.
Yes, let's do it.
Yes, I want us to look at the S-curve of learning so that people can really appreciate that and also understand what we're trying to talk about.
Love it. And while you're doing that,
today.
can I say, while you're pulling up that curve, can I say hello to a few people on here? So like
Exactly.
Fola Ronnie, hello, nice to meet you. I'm glad to say hello. And Anthony, nice to say hello to you as well. Timothy, nice to meet you in Kaduna, Northwest Nigeria. And okay, good. Michael, you found it and you shared the link. That's really nice of you. Okay.
Yes.
Love it. Ina G, hello to you. And Oludare, love it. Joel, hello. Okay, so you're going to put up the S curve, Adedonye?
Yes, let me put up the S-curve of learning. I want us to see it so that uh,
Here we go.
yes, in a minute, just a minute.
And then, okay, this will be fine. Okay, Mary, hello to you.
Hmm, hmm.
I can see it.
Yes, I'm just putting it up right now. Yeah. So I don't know if you can you see it well right now. Yes.
No, all I see is the episode 11. So I don't see the actual S curve. Maybe just hit scroll down 2 slides
So
and then we can see it.
can you see it now?
I don't see the S curve. I just see the slides.
Oh, I have the S curve is showing now.
Okay. Well, I could just talk to it if that works.
Oh,
Okay.
I'm just I don't
Hello,
know.
Nika.
Okay, maybe we can just
Just talk to it.
talk about
Okay.
it.
Oh, there it is. There it is. I see it. Okay.
Oh, you've seen it.
Yeah, now I can see it. So maybe it was just a
Oh,
little bit
great,
delayed. All
great,
right.
great. Yeah.
So let me
So
talk.
this is growth against time, kind
Yeah.
of. Yes. Like I told you, I was at the experience level, even after spending about 6 years in the banking industry. I wanted more.
Mhm.
Um, I was so particular about my career, about my learning, and all of that. But unfortunately, it's not happening. My question is this: how can you rapidly scale? Okay, maybe you can explain, I mean, so that people can understand.
Yeah.
With this S curve now, how can someone scale this S curve within a period of time? Then how do you know where you are at a particular point in time?
Yep. Okay, I love it. All right, great question. Okay, so let me give a little bit of background. So some of you may be familiar with the S curve. It's something that was popularized by E.M. Rogers back in 1962, and people used it to figure out how quickly an innovation would be adopted. So at the growth at the base of an S, the growth is always slow, and then you reach this tipping point, you move into hypergrowth, and then at saturation, the growth starts to taper off. So as I said a few minutes ago, I'd had this one aha that this theory of disruption, it's not just about products and services, it's also about people. Well, my second big aha as we were investing was that this S curve could help us understand how we learn and how we grow, how each one of us grow and develop. And so whenever you start something new, whether it's a new job, whether it's a new role, whether it's a new project, you are at the base of that S. And so what the S curve tells us is that initially, even though growth is happening, it's going to feel slow. There's not a lot of evidence of growth. And so it can feel like a slog. You can feel discouraged. You can feel impatient. And that's what the launch point of that S curve looks like, that place where you are inexperienced. But then you're going to put in the effort. You're going to accelerate into competence and confidence. And this is that steep, sleek back of the curve. Where at the launch point of the S curve, it took a lot of time to feel like anything was happening. Now, in a little time, a lot happens. It's exhilarating. All of your neurons are firing. You feel like you are exactly where you're supposed to be. You know enough, but not too much. It's hard, but not too hard. It's easy, but not too easy. So that's the sweet spot of that S. And then you reach mastery. And mastery is that place where, unlike at the launch point where you felt overwhelmed, now you feel a little bit underwhelmed because guess what? You figured everything out. You've achieved mastery. You're not getting the dopamine that you once got. And so you're really good at what you're doing, but you're a little bit bored. And so at the top of that S curve, now you've got a decision to make. Is this going to be a place where you're going to say, I'm at the top of my mountain, but I'm going to make this a summit, but it's not the summit. So I'm going to keep climbing. I'm going to keep doing something new. I'm going to find a way to push myself back into the sweet spot in this particular role. Or do I need to disrupt myself and jump to an entirely new S curve. And so it's that growth curve, that cycle where you learn and you leap and you repeat, that allows you as a human being to continue to grow. And I do believe that growth is our default setting. But when you understand that this is what growth looks like, it helps you understand the emotional journey of growth. And then you're able to navigate that better because you now have a map for any time you do something new, or anytime you're ready, you feel like, oh, I do need to do something new because it's time to jump to a new S curve.
The new S curve. So it's possible to have several S curves over a period of time. Is that what?
Absolutely.
Oh,
Absolutely.
okay. Let me also quickly turn to the next, where we look at the framework of disruption. So
Okay.
if you identify a particular at a particular time that you need to disrupt yourself, so could you please just talk to us about three of these accelerants, as
Uh-huh.
you've called them? So, for example, take the risk. Tell us the three most distinctive of these.
Of these ones. Okay.
Yes, of the disruptive processes.
All right. So before I do that, I mean, my question is are there three that you would like me to talk to? Because I'm happy to do whichever ones you think are most interesting.
Oh, okay. So, okay, let's talk about take the risk, take the
Okay.
right risk. So,
Okay.
how do you know how to take the right risk as a professional or as a
Yeah.
business professional? I mean, how do you know how to take the right risk?
Yeah. All right. So, yeah, I will absolutely answer that. And before I do that, I'm going to say hello to Ayatunde and Oscar and Francis and Taiwo and Linda. Hello to all of you. So, all right. So the very first, if you want to move this slide forward, and maybe you already have Adejoyin, so we can look at this. When you think about this framework of personal disruption, so you're on this S curve, and so this tells you, here's the mountain that I am on. I am climbing this mountain, and I now know I'm either at the base of that mountain, I know I'm in the middle of the mountain, or I know I'm at the top of that mountain. I now know where I am in my growth. That helps me understand the emotional journey that I'm having. Well, as you're climbing this mountain, you also have this backpack, and the backpack are the accelerants, the things that help you move along that S curve. And so, as Adedoyin talked about, there are 7 different growth accelerants that you can use. Oh, this is so funny. Okay. People are putting quotes from the article. I love that, Fularani. That's very fun. I'll just read it. We give a lot of airtime to building and buying disruptive companies, but the most overlooked economic engine is you. Okay, we'll say that again at the end. All right, so the first accelerant, and you can put in your backpack as you're climbing this S curve, as Adedoyin mentioned, is taking the right risk. So let me talk about what that is. Yeah. So one of the things that we think about from a disruption standpoint are 2 different kinds of risks. So there's market risk and there's competitive risk. So competitive risk, and you can think about this with your business, but I'm going to talk to you about it as if it's you. So for you as the individual. So competitive risk is, there's a big job, there's a huge opportunity, but you go onto LinkedIn and there's 100 people applying for it. And so now you have to figure out, can I compete for this job and win? Maybe you can, maybe you can't, but you are competing against 99 other people. Can you compete and win? So that's competitive risk. Market risk is there isn't a job posting on LinkedIn, but you are familiar with this particular company, this particular organization, and you think to yourself, there's a problem that I think I could solve for them. So I'm going to find a way to get an audience with someone in this organization who will hear what I have to say, and I'm going to talk to them about how I think I could solve this problem for them and what that would look like. Now, you don't know in this instance if you're going to be able to create the market. You don't know if you'll be able to create the job. You don't know if you'll be able to create that opportunity. You're playing where no one else is playing. But if you can, if you do, there are not 100 people applying for this job. There is one person applying for this job, and that one person is you. And so that's the difference. Competitive risk is there's an opportunity, lots of competition. Market risk, you don't know if there's an opportunity, but if there is, there's no competition. And what we know from the theory of disruption, and this is extrapolating for individuals, but with products anyway, we know that when you take on market risk, your odds of success are 6 times higher than when you take on competitive risk. And so, it's never only competitive or only market risk, but the more in your career you can think about, what are the market risk opportunities? How can I play where no one else is playing? You will increase your odds of being successful. And in a period of massive disruption, massive upheaval, there are a lot of markets to be created. And so this is a huge opportunity right now for all of us, if we're willing to do that scary thing of playing where no one else is playing.
Let's talk about, maybe just one more.
Yep.
I just want us to look at it. I know you also talked about your distinctive strength.
Yep.
Also, disruptive skills. Let's put it that way. Either disruptive skills or distinctive strength. So, what's so unique about the distinctive strength?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. So now here you are on this S curve. You're now saying, okay, I'm going to play where other people aren't playing. Well, it's a lot easier to play where other people aren't playing if you're feeling strong. So, and the best way to feel strong is to know what your strengths are. Now I talk about, so that then it becomes this flywheel, right? You've got your strengths and you're playing where no one else is playing. That gives you momentum to climb the curve. Now, when I talk about distinctive strengths, I'm talking not only about something that makes you feel strong, but it's something that people around you don't necessarily do well either. So you're in this unusual place of, let's say you're really good at marketing, but you're working around 9 people who are really good at accounting. Well, now all of a sudden, if you're one marketer around 10 marketers, it's harder to distinguish and differentiate yourself. But if you're an accountant who happens to be really good at marketing, then you've now not only got a strength, but a distinctive strength. So one way to think about this, another way to think about this is the koala. Like we all know the koala really well, this cuddly little animal, sleeps up to 20 hours a day. You're like, how does the koala survive? Well, it survives because it eats something that really no one else can eat. Like it's poisonous to humans. There's like 1 or 2 other animals that can eat it. So this becomes not only a strength, but a distinctive strength. And so it can sleep 20 hours a day. And so one of the things that you want to be thinking about for you as you're looking to move up that S curve is, what are my strengths and what makes me distinctive with that strength? I use that example of the marketing and of the CFO. Do you want me to give you do you want me to keep going, or want me to stop? I have more that I could say on
No.
this.
It's fine. It's still part of the conversation. So maybe there's a question. Someone is trying to ask a question. Joe Daniel, how do I share my question, please? I think we probably just move to the viewers just to ask them, just to look at some of the questions. Joe Daniel, please type in your question. Let's see your question. We can see it here. Oscar Ruche, thank you from Singapore. Taiwo Oloruntoba, thank you. Thank you, Linda. Thank you. I'm just trying to see comments, from people so that we can attend to some of those questions.
Right, absolutely. Well, while you're looking for questions that you want me to answer, I'll just make 2 comments. So there are 2 things that you can do to look for what your strengths are, and obviously you can do strengths finders, but there in our work we look at a number of different questions, and one of those questions we ask ourselves is, what exasperates you, what frustrates you? Because oftentimes whatever you say to yourself, that's just common sense. Everybody should know how to do this. It's likely that is one of your strengths, because it's super easy for you. It's not easy for everybody else, but you don't even recognize it. It's invisible to you. And then the second way you can know what your strengths are is to ask yourself, what compliments do I get a lot? Like just repeatedly get. And if you get those compliments a lot, people are basically saying to you, this is a strength and it's a really standout strength because they just mention it all the time. You dismiss it because you're like, well, that's no big deal. Like everybody does that. Again, what exasperates you, what compliments you do you get? Those are signals to you that these are strengths that you have. And so you want to just really recognize, okay, now I know what they are. Now I need to value them because I'm not valuing them because they're easy for me. But if you will value those strengths, they will make you feel strong, play where no one else is playing, and you're going to move up that growth curve a lot faster.
I totally agree with that. I remember that when I mean one of the adjectives that people kept using for me then, I mean, just to corroborate what you've just said now, was resourceful. It became a common, oh, go and meet doing is resourceful. Even where I was working then. So, and I began to look at, I was digging, deep to know more about, oh, so resourceful. I mean, that was it for me. Thank you,
Yeah.
Whitney. Yeah,
Oh, I love
thank
that.
you.
I love that. I love that too, because when someone says you're resourceful, what are they saying? They're saying, they're not only telling you what a strength you have, they're saying you play where other people aren't playing. They're saying when there's a constraint, you're not a victim, you're a transformer. You figure out what to do with it. And you're also managing your expectations, which allows you to move forward. So a resourceful person isn't competing with what is, they are creating what is. And so resourceful encapsulates several of the growth accelerants along that curve, which I love. Okay. Do you want me to answer some questions?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
we've got a couple of questions now. So let's look at this one from Joel Daniel.
Yep. Perfect.
Thank you so greatly for good teaching. What are parameters that define your position on the S curve per time? For
Yeah.
example, how do I know when I'm at the master stage level?
Yeah. Okay. Great question.
Interesting.
All right. So first of all, Joel, one thing, okay, I'm going to give you a couple of resources and then I'm going to talk you through it. So we've got a podcast, the Disrupt Yourself podcast, episode 80, which will talk you through the various parts of that S curve. So that's one thing just to be aware of. We also actually have a tool called the S curve insight tool that you can take and administer with your team that can plot not only where you are, but where other people on your team are. So now, how do you know when you're in mastery? There are a number of different questions that you can ask yourself. One of those questions is to start by just asking yourself, hold on, excuse me, is to ask yourself, how long have I been in this role with the same boss on the same project, doing the same thing with nothing new to do? If you have been doing that same thing for 3 to 4 years, that's a pretty good signal that you are in mastery, just the time and role with nothing major having changed. It's going to depend on the discipline. If you're working in fast food, you're going to get to mastery a lot faster, but that's the first thing. That start there. The second thing you can ask yourself is, you're in mastery when you have a lot of people coming to you and asking you questions. How do you do this? Who do I go to? What does this look like? They're asking you for advice. They're asking you for guidance. Lots and lots of people asking for help from you. And you find that you're able to answer lots of questions, but you don't have a lot of questions. That's another indication for you that you are in mastery. Another indication for you is that you can feel yourself sort of disengaging. You can say you're saying to yourself, I like this company. I like the people I work with, but I'm just not feeling it like I was feeling it before. And that's a signal to you that your brain is sort of saying, kind of figured this out. And I know that I've got this latent innovative capacity. I know I need to do something more, because if I don't, this plateau will become a precipice. So I would start with, how long have you been in the role doing the exact same things? Are lots of people asking you questions? Are you finding that you're just a little bit bored and just asking yourself, is there something new that I need to be doing? Those are all going to be indications that that you're potentially in mastery.
Wow, questions were pouring in. My box is filled to the brim. My box is filled to the brim. I mean, can we just take a
Yeah,
few
let's do
more?
another board. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. How do you deal with colleagues who despise or feels insecure around you? Because you seem to get a lot of compliment for your strength
Mhm.
as you climb the S curve.
Yeah. Oh, it's such a great question. So I think there are two answers to this, Ina G. If I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I think that the first answer is that you can't control the experience that they are having. If they're struggling with their own insecurity around what you are doing, you can't control that. So I think that's the first thing. It doesn't mean that they can't make your life difficult and miserable in the process because they're jealous or envious, but there's only so much you can control in this situation. So that's the first thing I would say, is that you've got to control what you can control. And and um, I would say to you is that sometimes when people aren't treating us well, it's because they're feeling like they're not included. They're feeling like they've been left behind. They're feeling like they don't matter. And so, what I would also ask myself, and invite you to ask yourself, is what is within my control to bring this person along? What is within my control to make this person a part of what we're doing?
What I'm
What is
doing.
within my control to help them feel it? Because if they're feeling jealous, it's because they're saying, "Does my S curve matter? Am I on an
Hmm,
S curve that's interesting and challenging, engaging for me?"
hmm,
Because you're having a lot of fun on yours, you're in that sweet spot, and they're saying, "I don't know that I am on mine." And so, depending on what's in your control, is how do you encourage them, make it possible for them to be on an S curve, have an opportunity that feels equally vitalizing, and I don't know if that's a word, equally energizing as yours does to you. And so, it's very much a both and, where you cannot control, and you do have a lot within your power to possibly find something to include them, first of all, but then also find something for them to do so that they can feel as excited about the work that they're doing as you do about yours.
hmm. Wow. Questions. I mean, we could just take very few. Let's take one from Yinka Konde. Yes, Yinka is asking a question. Are there instances where a decline could occur on the S curve? If yes, why?
Yes. Oh, great question, Nika. Um, so there are a couple of things that can happen. Let's start with the most obvious. When you are at the top of that S curve, you're in mastery on an S curve. What we know is that if you are no longer learning, and you're no longer getting the dopamine that comes from learning, your progress can start to stall. And because we know that if you're not going forwards, you're going backwards, you can actually start to slip back down the curve in not a good way. And we always need to be going forward, and if we're not going forward, we're going backwards. So yes, you can decline on the S curve. Now, another way that you can, a more practical and sometimes a really positive way, is, let's say you're at the top of an S curve, and something like a pandemic happens. You might have felt like, I'm at the top, I've got it all figured out. Well, now all of a sudden you've got to figure out, how am I going to manage a remote team? How am I going to manage a virtual team? How am I going to manage a hybrid team? How am I going to deal with burnout? So now all of a sudden you were in this role and you thought, I've got it dialed in. You're now back in the sweet spot because you've got all sorts of problems and challenges to deal with and face and master that you didn't have previously. So I wouldn't call that a decline. I would call, in this particular instance, it's just meant that where you thought you were at the top of the mountain, you realized, oh, actually, the mountaintop is up there. And so it's not a decline. It's just that where you are on the mountain changes because the mountain changes. But I think you were probably asking the first question, but I'm hoping that both of those answers are helpful.
Exactly. Yeah. Taiwo is saying that. I mean, Agebe is saying, "Oh, wow, that was very helpful. Thank you so
Good.
much, Whitney."
Good. Oh, you're very welcome.
Yeah, I have another one here. Anthony is saying, is asking this question also, that when do I know when do I know it's time to move on in an organization? When you realize a lot of people in your team are weak.
Yeah. That's a great question, Anthony. So I would I would answer that question by answering a prior question, which is, are the people on your team weak, or are they at the launch point of the S curve? It's a very different question. So, meaning, are they weak? Because, first of all, I believe that everyone's on an S curve. And if we're on the right S curve, we're all going to be high performers on the right S curve. We have to choose to get onto the right S curve, but on the right S curve, we'll all be high performers. So, the first question I would ask yourself is, are the people on my team just on the wrong S curve? And if they're on the wrong S curve, then what do we need to do to move them to another S curve? And if you can't control that, then you may need to move to one where you've got people around you where you're all on S curves that are going to work. If they are just at the launch point, then this is a real opportunity for you where they're not weak. It's just that they need more training, they need more guidance. And so here you are in mastery in the sweet spot where you can do these S curve loops. We know from mountain climbing, it's hard to climb a mountain, but sometimes it's even harder to go back down, loop, bring people in and bring them along. And so something that you might want to consider is, well, how can you challenge yourself? How can you make helping these people that are at the launch point develop and grow? How can that become an S curve for you? So again, are they weak because it's the wrong S curve, or are they weak because they're at the launch point and it's the right S curve? And then what can you do? How can your growth be tied to helping them grow?
I'm not sure we can take all these questions. I mean, questions are just coming in.
Well, should
Questions.
we do one
I mean,
more? Should we do one more
I'm
before
not.
we wrap up?
I'm not. Yeah,
Yeah.
not sure we
Okay.
can take all.
Okay.
Maybe. I mean, hi Whitney. Mary is asking, could you please mention and expatiate the
Yeah.
growth, the 7 growth accelerants? I
Yeah.
mean, you've talked about
I'll
it,
do it really fast. I'll do
but
it really fast. Yeah. So first of all, Mary, if you go on to our podcast, starting with episode 80 and then 100 and then 120 and 140, it goes through each of the growth accelerants in detail. So that, if you want to do more work. Now, what are they? Number one is to take the right kinds of risks. And so I talked about that in detail. It's this idea of, how are you going to play where no one else is playing? How are you going to create rather than compete? Number two is play to your distinctive strengths, figure out what you do well. And then when you figure out what you do well, value it. Don't dismiss it. Don't devalue it because it's easy for you. Because when you feel strong, you're much more likely to create, not to compete, to play where no one else is playing. Number three is embrace your constraints. So as you move up that curve, you can think, if only I had more time or money, then I could really gain some progress. But as we learned from Ada Douyin, if your ability to be resourceful, you can take any constraint that you have and create something with it. It becomes a tool of creation. That's number three, embrace constraints. Number four, examine your expectations. What are your expectations? If you find yourself saying things should be different, that means there's a gap between reality and what is. We compete with what is instead of creating with what is. So what are your expectations around the experience that you're having? That's number four. Number five, step back to grow. So step back to slingshot forward. That's the whole idea of disruption. That's how you're going to move forward. Maybe it's a lateral in your career. Maybe it's taking time to take a break. Number six, leverage failure. Failure is a huge tool of creation if we can get rid of the shame. So it's always the shame that's the problem. It's not the failure. So how are you going to take that thing that you learned when things didn't work and use it to catapult you forward? And then number seven is to be driven by discovery. You take a step forward, you gather feedback, and you adapt. Because again, as a disruptor, you are playing where no one else is playing. So those are the 7 accelerants of disruption. Again, the podcast will go through those in great detail. I hope that was helpful.
yeah, I mean, I'm going to share the podcast link in the comment section later. So let me ask. I mean, there are just about 3 questions before we call it a day. I want us to go to the team. I just want us to ask 1 or 2 questions around when you wrote your latest book, building build an A team. You said something that if we want our employees to keep working at a high level, an S-curve management strategy is key. So what do you mean, and what do you see as its primary benefit uh, to organizations?
Yeah, great question. Okay, so if I'm a manager, as a manager, I'm basically every single person's on an S curve, then I'm managing a portfolio of S curves. And so, as I started to say or allude to earlier, if I know where each person is in their growth, and more importantly, where they think they are in their growth, then I know what to do to help them build momentum. So,
Okay, please, apologies for interjecting, so that
oh,
I mean, so it's imperative to know where every member of your teams are on the S curve.
yes.
Oh,
Yes.
great,
Yeah, because
great.
I'm going to manage you very as a leader, I'm going to manage you very differently if you're at the launch point, and know, okay, so he's just starting in this role, and you can be a new CEO, you can be straight out of college, but you're just starting in this role. You need support, you need training in order to build momentum. That's very different than a person who's in mastery at the S curve, who knows what they're doing. They need a different kind of, they need challenge. They need something new to do so that because I'm at risk of losing them or them just shutting down and not working. So, and then if they're in the sweet spot, one of the things they need from me is, because everything's working, they need me to be saying thank you to them, because it's super easy to ignore people who are doing a really good job. So depending on where they are in their growth and where they think they are in their growth, because if I've got a person who thinks they're in mastery and I don't think they are, but they think they are, and they're good at what they do, guess what? They're going to leave before I even thought to think about giving them something new. So when you understand that, you can manage them, you can give them assignments that allow them to build momentum regardless of where they are. And depending on what you're trying to get done as a team, if you've got some really big hairy problem, maybe you need more people in mastery. So you innovate. Your what you want to get done as a team is also going to dictate sort of the composition or breakdown of where people are in their growth.
Yeah, that's great. There's just one last question that probably I would like to ask. I mean, someone sent this to my inbox.
Uh-huh.
I'll put it up now. Okay. Yes, I'm showing this now.
And
Whitney.
Joel, I know you're asking for the article on the 7 growth accelerants. So if you start with podcast episode 80, we also have a download, which I can't remember what it is. So if you email me at wj@whitneyjohnson.com, I can send you the download so you can get a rundown of each of those accelerants. So happy to do that
Excellent.
for you. Okay. So what is this?
Great.
Okay.
Sometimes people
Yeah.
disrupt themselves, and in the new S-curve, progress is even slower than expected.
Yeah.
In this case of is this a case of personal disruption gone wrong?
Yeah. The answer is maybe, but you don't know yet. So what I would say is that, remember earlier, or maybe I didn't say this, but so now I'm saying it. So when you disrupt yourself, your odds of success, you play where no one else is playing, are 6 times higher. But that's still 6% to 36%. So whenever you jump to a new S curve, it might be the wrong S curve. It might be. You'll know that you probably want to persist if you're taking the right risks, if you're playing to your strengths. Maybe you just need more time to gain momentum. If you're not playing to your strengths, then maybe it turns out to be the wrong S curve, and so you need to jump to a new one. But here's the thing: whether it was the right one for you or the wrong one for you, there were things that you learned and that you can use in your next S curve. So again, it may be, but if you're playing where no one else is playing and you're playing to your strengths, you probably want to persist a little bit longer, because remember, the evidence of the growth is not obvious early on. If it turns out that those things are not true, then you jump to a new one, but you know that there are things that you learned on that S curve that are going to help you on the next one.
Great, great. So, I mean, for us to finally conclude on this, So, what would you advise? What's your advice for professionals, most especially people who are starting their careers
Mhm.
newly, who who are even confused from the beginning?
What
How
would be
should
my
they?
advice from the very beginning?
Yes, what would be your advice
Yeah,
for them?
so my very high level advice would be for anyone who's starting their career or starting a new job is just to have in your head this idea of a map, that the S curve is a map that allows you to track your growth. It allows you to track the emotional journey of your growth so that when you start something new, know that you are going to be at the bottom of that S. It's going to feel slow. It's going to feel discouraging. You're going to feel impatient. It's going to feel like a slog. And guess what? That is normal. And then you
Mm,
also know when you get to the top, when you're feeling like, I loved it here, I love my boss, but I have to do something new. Guess what? That's normal. So that's what I would say to anybody who's starting out is just think of this as a way to map your emotional journey. And when you feel like you don't know what you're doing, oh, I'm at the bottom, I'm at the launch point of an S curve.
mm. That's great. That's great, Whitney. That's great. I mean, just finally. So, what new ideas are you working on right now?
Yes. Well, so it just so happens I am working on my next book, and you will not be surprised to hear that the title of it is called Smart Growth: How to Grow Your People to Grow Your Company. It will be published in January of 2022. And I am taking this idea around the S curve and going deep, deep, deep on it
Deep, deep,
and
deep.
really outlining it. And so for the individual, but then also giving implications for leaders. I'm really excited about it.
Exactly. Wow. Thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
for this great opportunity. I know every time I come to you, Whitney, you always you always give me that, I mean, that audience. And it's quite I feel elated. I feel I'm excited. I'm
Mm.
excited. Thank you
Aw.
for your time. Thank you for everything. I mean, the things that you do, are quite unique. Most of the time, I listen to your podcast. The kind of people that, I mean, you have encouraged me. You have
Good.
encouraged me. I mean, from time to time, you come on LinkedIn, on podcasts, you put out those content out there, and I mean, these are things that people really need in this challenging time. So thank you so much.
Aw.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you for having me, Auditorian, and thank you to everybody who commented and for your questions. It was just a really fun conversation. So thank you to you for having me. Thank you for your wonderful community.
Thank you, Whitney. Yeah, this is the end of the show. So please join me next month for another episode of the Performance Tools LinkedIn Live. Thank you, Whitney.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Yeah, bye. Mhm.